I came home a day early because I missed my son. That was the honest, simple truth. Not suspicion, not instinct. Just that quiet longing that settles into your chest when work stretches on too long and bedtime stories turn into voice notes sent from hotel rooms. The meeting had ended faster than expected. I packed my bag with a lightness I hadn't felt in weeks, already imagining his surprised smile when he saw me at the door. I didn't tell anyone I was coming home early. I wanted it to be a gift, one of those ordinary, beautiful moments that later become memories you hold onto when life feels heavy. The taxi stopped in front of our house just after noon. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Our street was usually alive at that hour. Kids shouting, doors opening, a neighbor's radio humming somewhere nearby. But today, everything felt paused like a held breath. I paid the driver and stood for a second, adjusting my bag on my shoulder, grounding myself in the familiarity of home. The curtains were drawn. That small detail made me pause. My son hated dark rooms during the day. He said sunlight made the walls feel friendly. I had teased him once about it, and he'd replied very seriously, homes have feelings too. I smiled at the memory as I reached for my phone. I called the school, not because I didn't believe my wife, but because I wanted to hear his name spoken out loud. It made the distance feel shorter. The woman on the line checked the system. He wasn't here today, she said. I nodded automatically, even though she couldn't see me, and yesterday. She added gently. Something tightened in my chest. Still, I didn't panic. Children get sick. Life happens. Trust makes room for explanations. I called my wife. She answered after a few rings. Her voice was familiar, but something in it felt stretched, as if she were holding it together carefully. He's sick, she said quickly, before I could even ask. I stayed home with him. I'm back early, I said, smiling as I spoke. I'll be there in 10 minutes. There was a pause, not long, just long enough to notice. Okay, she replied. We're resting. I told myself not to overthink it. I told myself love doesn't live in suspicion. I told myself I was tired. When I unlocked the door, the quiet inside the house wrapped around me immediately. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of naps or shared rest. It was hollow, empty. The lights were off. The air felt cool, too cool. Hello. I called softly, already knowing no one would answer. My suitcase slipped from my hand and landed with a dull thud on the floor. The sound echoed more than it should have. The living room was spotless, not our usual lived-in tidy, but something else intentional, as if someone had erased themselves carefully. Then I saw the note. It lay on the dining table, perfectly centered, white paper against dark wood. Waiting, I walked toward it slowly, every step heavy, my heart beginning to beat in a way I didn't recognize. There were no explanations, no signature, just 3 words written neatly, deliberately. Please forgive me. I read them again and again. I called her name, louder this time, nothing. I checked the bedroom. The closet was missing half its contents. Her side was empty. My son's room stopped me cold. His backpack still hung on the hook by the door. His shoes were lined up the way I'd taught him. His favorite book lay open on the bed, a page folded at the corner like he'd planned to come back. That was the moment something inside me shifted, not into fear, not yet, but into a deep, aching understanding that whatever had happened had been planned, and that the life I trusted so gently had already begun to change quietly without asking me. If you're ready, I can continue with I sat at the dining table for a long time after reading the note. I didn't cry. I didn't shout her name again. I simply sat there, staring at those 3 words, letting them settle into me like a truth I wasn't ready to name. The house felt unfamiliar now, like it belonged to someone else who had already moved on. Please forgive me. Forgive what? For leaving, for lying, for deciding alone. The silence offered no answers. I folded the paper carefully as if it were fragile and slipped it into my pocket. My hands were steady, which surprised me. Somewhere inside, I realized this wasn't shock. It was recognition. A quiet knowing that something fragile between us had been breaking for a long time, and I had been too gentle to hear it. I walked through the house slowly, noticing details I had overlooked before. The framed photos on the wall were still there, but some were missing from their usual places. The bookshelf felt lighter. The bathroom drawer held only my things now. It was like a careful subtraction, nothing chaotic, nothing rushed. That hurt more than disorder would have. I checked my phone again, no messages, no missed calls. I sat on the couch and replayed our last conversations in my head. The way she'd grown quieter over months, the way her smiles no longer reached her eyes, the way she avoided long talks, saying she was tired, overwhelmed, unsure. I had believed her, I had wanted to. I stood and opened the kitchen drawer beneath the mail slot. That's where I found the folder. It was thin, beige, almost hidden. Inside were copies of documents I recognized immediately: our son's school records, medical information, and a lease agreement. Her name was on it, and beneath it, his. My chest tightened, not with panic, but with a deep, aching sadness. She hadn't just left. She had prepared. She had planned a future that did not include me, and she had done it quietly, patiently, while I was still trying to fix things I didn't know were broken. I thought of all the nights I'd stayed up working late, telling myself I was providing, telling myself love meant endurance. I thought of the times I'd asked her if she was okay, and she'd smiled and said, of course. That was the betrayal, not the leaving, but the pretending. I called her again, straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I didn't know what to say that wouldn't come from panic or fear, and I didn't want my first words to be small. Instead, I went into my son's room and sat on his bed. The sheets still smelled like his shampoo. I traced the edge of the book he'd been reading, imagining his finger holding the page open. I whispered his name. The quiet answered back. That night, I slept on the couch, not because I couldn't enter the bedroom, but because it felt like crossing into something already gone. Sleep came in fragments. Every sound made me sit up, hoping the door would open. It didn't. The next morning, I made coffee for 2 out of habit, then poured 1 cup down the sink. I checked my phone again. Still nothing. That's when the weight of it finally settled, not as anger, but as grief. Grief for the family I thought we were. Grief for the trust I gave so freely. Grief for the version of myself who believed silence meant peace. By afternoon, a single message appeared on my screen. He's safe. I just needed space. I stared at the words until they blurred. Space, as if love were something you could step away from without explanation. As if trust could be folded neatly and set aside. I typed and erased a dozen responses. None felt right, so I set the phone down. Because in that moment, I understood something important. If I answered too quickly, I would be begging to be included in a decision that had already been made without me. And I was done disappearing quietly in my own life. If you'd like, I can continue with I didn't reply to her message right away. At first, that felt unnatural. I had always been the one who responded quickly, who softened moments before they grew sharp, who filled silence so it wouldn't turn uncomfortable. Waiting felt like holding my breath, but slowly. I realized it was also giving me space to hear myself think. The house stayed quiet for days. I went to work, answered emails, smiled at people who asked how my trip went. I told them it was fine. I wasn't lying. I just wasn't telling the whole truth yet. There is a difference, and I was learning it. At night, the quiet returned. It sat beside me on the couch, followed me into the kitchen, lingered in the hallway outside my son's room. I didn't rush to fill it with noise. I let it stay. That's when the memories began to rearrange themselves. Not dramatically, not all at once, just small moments drifting back with new meaning. Her habit of closing her laptop when I entered the room, the way she started taking phone calls outside, how she spoke about needing to find herself, but never invited me into that conversation. I had told myself it was stress, that marriage meant patience, that love meant trusting even when things felt unclear. But silence, I realized, can be honest when people are not. I opened old messages not to reread the words, but to notice the pauses between them. The times she stopped sharing details, the days she responded with fewer sentences, fewer questions. I saw how often I had adjusted myself to keep things smooth, how often I chose calm over clarity. One evening, I sat at the dining table again, the same place where the note had waited for me. I unfolded it once more. The paper had softened from being handled. The ink hadn't faded. Please forgive me. It struck me then that the note wasn't written for me. It was written to ease her conscience. Forgiveness offered before truth is not healing. It's avoidance. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me still. I scheduled a counseling session the next morning. I didn't tell anyone why. I didn't need validation. I needed perspective, a quiet voice outside my own that could help me separate love from erasure. The counselor listened more than she spoke. When she finally did, she said something simple. Being kind doesn't mean being absent from your own life. I carried that sentence with me afterward, letting it settle into places that had been tired for a long time. Another message came 2 days later. She misses you. I miss you too. I just didn't know how to say I wasn't okay. I read it slowly, and for the first time, I didn't rush to comfort her. I realized how often I had made space for her feelings while shrinking my own. How often I believed that if I stayed gentle enough, everything would stay intact. But relationships don't break because one person is too strong. They break when one person is never allowed to be fully seen. I walked through the park near my apartment that evening, watching parents push swings, hearing children laugh. The ache was there, deep and steady, but it no longer felt like it would consume me. It felt like something I could carry. I thought about my son, about the kind of strength I wanted him to learn. Not loud strength, not angry strength, but the kind that knows when to pause, when to listen, when to stand without shouting. That night, I finally replied, "I'm glad he's safe. I need honesty before anything else. No accusations, no pleading, just a boundary." As I set the phone down, a calm settled over me. Not peace, not yet, but something close to it. I understood now that silence wasn't my enemy. It was my teacher, and it was showing me the shape of the truth, one quiet moment at a time. When you're ready, I can complete the story with when she finally agreed to meet. It wasn't dramatic. No late night phone call, no long apology, just a short message with a time and place, a quiet cafe halfway between where I lived now and where she said she was staying. Neutral ground that felt appropriate. I arrived early. I chose a table near the window and ordered tea, something warm and steady. While I waited, I watched people pass by outside, each of them carrying their own unseen stories. For the first time in weeks, my breathing felt even. When she walked in, I recognized her immediately, and yet she looked different, not freer, just tired. We hugged briefly. It was polite. Careful, she talked first, about feeling lost, about fear, about how small she had felt in a life that looked fine from the outside. She said she hadn't meant to hurt me, that she thought space would give her clarity, that taking our son felt easier than explaining everything. I listened without interrupting, not because I agreed, but because I finally trusted myself enough not to disappear in someone else's emotions. When she finished, she looked at me like she was waiting for a verdict. I didn't give her one. Instead, I said quietly, "I wish you had trusted me with the truth before making a faltering decision for all of us." She lowered her eyes. "I didn't think you'd understand," she said. I nodded. That may be true, but you didn't give me the chance." There was no anger in my voice, just clarity. We talked about our son next, about routines, about stability, about how children feel more than they understand. I spoke calmly, deliberately, not as someone trying to win, but as someone protecting something sacred. "I want shared parenting," I said. "Clear communication, no surprises. He deserves consistency." She agreed quickly, almost gratefully. I realized then that boundaries aren't punishments. They're instructions for how to treat us. Over the following weeks, we worked through the details with patience. There were moments of sadness, moments of guilt, moments where old habits tried to pull me back into fixing things for her. But each time I paused, I asked myself one question: am I honoring myself right now? If the answer was no, I stayed quiet. I moved fully into my new place, a smaller apartment with tall windows and soft morning light. I hung my son's drawings on the fridge. I set up his room first. When he stayed with me again, he asked simple questions. "Why don't you live together anymore?" I knelt to his level and said, "Sometimes adults need to change things so they can be healthier. We both love you. That part doesn't change." He nodded, accepting it the way children do when they feel safe. On the nights he wasn't there, the apartment was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It felt honest. I filled it with books, music, slow dinners with myself. One evening, weeks later, I found the note again. "Please forgive me. I didn't tear it up. I didn't keep it close. I placed it in a drawer and closed it gently." Forgiveness, I realized, doesn't mean forgetting or returning to what was. It means releasing the need to be understood by someone who couldn't meet you where you stood. I had loved deeply, I had trusted openly, and now I respected myself. That was the outcome, not loss, but growth. Not bitterness, but boundaries. Not revenge, but peace. The life lesson came quietly, the way the strongest truths often do. When you stop abandoning yourself to keep others comfortable, you don't become harder. You become whole. And that was enough.